All right, our first speaker this morning is going to give you some practical information. And like we mentioned last night, one of the fun things that we get to do as moms is we get to do everything. And so because we get to do everything, then we need tips and things of knowing how that we can always improve and better ourselves. And so I want to go ahead and call Gretchen Brown up here. Gretchen Brown is a registered dietitian, and her specialty is gluten-free, but she is really going to just talk to us overall about the health and nutrition for our families. And I'm excited because as I was talking with her, I was learning so much, and I was so excited that there's so much information that just the responsibility we have as moms and how our responsibility in feeding our kids really impacts all areas of their life. So please welcome Gretchen Brown.
Good morning. How amazing was last night? Amazing. Wendy and Jen had such great stories and memorable messages that it was just really great. And one of the things they shared was that they are not Type A people, and I am your official Type A speaker to start the weekend. So therefore, we'll be standing at the podium with my computer and my notes. And I didn't bring I'm going to be all sciencey with you this morning, but I didn't bring my white coat, so we'll just all kind of relax into it and have a good morning together. I'm so grateful that my friend Shamin and fellow Baylor Bear, any other Sikkim Baylor Bears here this morning? Sikkim? Yeah, we don't know. Invited me to come here today and speak with you a little bit about nutrition. It's an honor and a privilege to stand before you as a fellow mommy whose desire it is to feed well the souls and the bellies of my kids. I hope that you all had a great night's rest and you had a little bit of caffeine and that you're ready to talk a little bit about food. And be patient with me as I get all this technology. There we go. But first, I think we all agree that the Lord has blessed us with these little people, that He's knit so perfectly together, like Savannah read the scripture last night to us, in our wombs and in our hearts, and then He gives us the responsibility once they're placed in our arms of caring for those little people. And further, what we teach them in every part of their lives, including what's on their dinner plates, they take with them as they grow. And there's nothing more that we desire as mothers than for our children to grow to be contributing members of society and healthy parts of the body of Christ as well. And there's nothing more fundamental to that growth as what they eat. I think Remy from Disney's Ratatouille said it best when he said, "You are what you eat, and I only want to eat the good stuff." We are, however, all experts at eating because we've all eaten every day of our lives from the first day that we were born. And then we come to the dinner table with our own culinary cultural influences and likes and dislikes and feelings about food. And then we add to the mix the social media and the television and all the voices in our heads telling us the best new way to eat. And so it can all feel very personal and very foreign at the same time, which leads us to who is right? Is it the vegan, the paleo, the raw? It can all be very baffling. Maybe you're confused like this woman who thinks clean eating means devouring cupcakes till nothing on the floor. Yes, I think we all wish that was true. There are many days I wish that was true. But today I want to talk with you about what I believe as a dietitian and as a mommy is the best way that we can feed ourselves, our families, and our kids. First, I think I'd be remiss in not sharing with you the relevance of organic foods and genetically modified foods in the food industry today. So I'm going to touch on that a little bit. And then I want to share with you a major conversation right now in the medical and definitely nutrition field, which is the importance of gut health. And last, on a related subject, and one of my very most favorite subjects to talk about, as Shamin mentioned, is the issue of gluten. Lastly, I'm going to end with 5 easy take-home tips that will hopefully set you up for success for your family, in your kitchens, and on the plates of your little ones. These will just be bites that you can jot down and take with you. So let's get back first to the question of, so who's right? What do I feed my family? And my answer is whole, real foods. These are the actual real foods that we find in the grocery stores, on the perimeter of the grocery stores, in the produce section, the dairy cases, the meat cases on the perimeter. The ones that have little to no ingredient lists. If they do have an ingredient list, it's foods names that we recognize and don't look like they're part of a chemistry set. These are proteins, which include the animal meats and nuts and seeds, beans and dairy, and vegetables, fruits, whole grains that are less refined, and natural sweeteners like maple and honey. This list means that we fill our kitchens with these foods and we limit the processed foods, the sugary sweets and snacks and packaged foods that are all over and so readily available. And that we watch the highly processed foods that are full of sugar and carbohydrates and really offer little in the way of nutrition. Not that they're never allowed or that they're big no-nos, but that our kids understand that they're for a time and a season, and that these healthy, real foods are the norm. I believe in organic foods, and I'll tell you why, but before I do that, I want to address the elephant in the room that often comes up when you bring up the issue of organic foods, which is the cost. So earlier this month, I went to my local grocery store here in Northern Virginia. It's just a chain grocery store. And I priced out some foods that would be kind of on my grocery list for whole, real foods. And that are celery, strawberries, spinach, potatoes, eggs, milk, and ground beef. And I have the list here. You can see that for some of the foods, it's an issue of maybe just a couple dimes, and some of it's a matter of dollars. Altogether, it's a difference of $9.90. That is a 39% difference. I certainly want to explain to you and have you realize that I respect family budgets and I respect constraints with money and financial boundaries. But I wanted to share that for my family, we see that extra 39% as an investment in our kids. If your family is anything like mine, then you spend money on extracurricular activities and sports and toys and iPads and clothes, all of those things, maybe even the apps for the iPads if your kid's like mine and he asks for them every day. Expensive clothes, maybe fancy electronics. This extra 39% in my family, we see it as the actual building blocks of the bodies, the mind, and ultimately the health of our children. Not an iPad or a t-shirt or something that would fade away. Let me explain to you why we think that it's worth the investment. It's no secret that conventional non-organic foods contain pesticides. The definition of a pesticide is any substance used to destroy, suppress, or alter the life cycle of any pest. We also know that some of these pesticides can cause cancers, developmental and neurological disorders, and reproductive and hormone disruptions in humans. So the farmers spray the ground and the crops, hoping to kill the bugs so they can grow their crops nice and healthy. You buy the food, you feed the food to your kids, and unfortunately your kids are exposed to some of these pesticides as well. The fact is that children are at greater risk for exposure to these things because their bodies are growing, their bodies are developing, and it puts them more at risk. Relative to their size, they breathe and eat and drink more than adults do. Over 1 billion pounds of pesticides are used in the United States every year, and that equals about 3 pounds per person. Once again, it's hard to avoid the pesticides altogether. They've even shown that children in utero, unborn children, are exposed to pesticides while in the womb. So if we can avoid feeding those pesticides to our kids directly on their plates, then they really can see a great difference in the amount of exposure. The good news, we need good news, is that the Environmental Working Group is a great crew that has put together some lists for us. What they did was they took all the USDA pesticide data on produce and they compiled it into 2 lists, the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Those are the ones that are worst offenders and then the cleanest of the foods that have the least pesticide residues when found. Some of the worst are celery, which has 64 pesticide residues. This is 10 known or probable carcinogens, 27 suspected hormone disruptors, 12 neurotoxins, and 12 developmental or reproductive toxins. Strawberries have 45 pesticides. This is 6 known or probable carcinogens, 16 suspected hormone disruptors, 7 neurotoxins, and 6 developmental or reproductive toxins. So we've just scratched the surface. This is only celery and strawberries we've discussed. So in 2012, Washington State University did a study that showed that the chemicals can have an effect not only on the exposed animal, but for the next 3 generations of its offspring. So it's big news, right? This is not just our kids we're talking about, but it's their grandkids and their grandkids. But the good news, and you'll see why I think it makes a really big difference, is that Harvard researcher Dr. Alex Liu showed that in just 5 days of eating an all-organic diet, that the pesticide byproducts were completely removed from the children's urine in 5 days. University of Washington study was also done, and they showed that children who eat a predominantly organic diet with organic juices had only 1/6 the amount of pesticides in their urine. You can see why it can make a really big difference. All hope is not lost. Not to mention, when you buy organic, it sends a message that you support environmentally friendly farming, and that also maintains the soil and the integrity of the soil. It safeguards workers who have to deal with these chemicals, or don't have to deal with these chemicals. And it also protects water quality and wildlife. If you can remember the grocery list that I priced out a couple slides back, I had celery, strawberries, spinach, and potatoes. But those are all included on the Dirty Dozen list. So if you do have financial constraints and you have a tight budget, prioritize by what's on the Dirty Dozen list and buy the things that are there as your organic foods, and you can get away with the Clean 15 knowing that you're still treating your children safely. That list is readily available online. All right, as if the pesticides weren't enough, I'm going to move on now to the antibiotics and hormones. Particularly the meats and the milks contain antibiotics and hormones. We've got the meats that are fed these foods using the pesticides, and they're also given antibiotics and hormones as they're growing. In my research, I found that 80 to 95% of the feedlot cattle, the standard feedlot cattle, are treated with hormones to make them grow faster. 20% of the cow's milk in the United States comes from cows who've been injected with a hormone called recombinant bovine growth hormone. This is a genetically modified hormone that increases their milk supply by 10 to 15%. Did you know that in 1950, the average cow produced 5,000 pounds of milk a year? Today, one single cow produces 20,000 pounds of milk a year, all because of this hormone that they're getting. So once again, we have chemicals and hormones and drugs that are building up in the body, the meat, the muscle, the milk of these animals. And then we serve it in our kitchens. And those things are passed on the dinner tables to our children and our families. And the children are so much more susceptible to the risks with the exposure, and especially the babies in our bellies when we are pregnant. So lastly, let's talk for a minute about GMOs. Genetically modified foods have genes that are injected into their DNA by their bacterial genes, other fruits and vegetables, and other animals. They inject these genes into the DNA of a new food. These biotech companies are doing this so that they can yield larger crops. They can make plants that are more drought and herbicide resistant, and they can be longer shelf lives as well. So far, there are 8 genetically modified food crops that are grown in the United States. There are a couple more in the works, like apples and salmon and potatoes, too. The 5 major groups of crops are soy, corn, canola, cotton, and sugar beets. And those GMO varieties make up the majority of the crops that are grown and sold in the United States. As you can see by this image, 93% of the crops grown in the United States of soy are GMO. 95% of the sugar beets are GMO. and 86% of corn is GMO. Most Americans don't realize that GMO ingredients end up in about an estimated 80% or more of processed foods. I'll tell you, it's really hard to find foods that don't have soy, corn, and sugar beet ingredients in them. Start looking at your ingredient labels and you will see it everywhere. So these GMO foods have a lot of people in the health industry concerned because we're not exactly sure what our body does with them and how they're going to react because they're new organisms. There have been all sorts of health risks related to them, including infertility and immune problems, weird changes in major organs, and even strange growths in the gastrointestinal tracts. Eating organic food when and where you can means that you get to skip the pesticides, the antibiotics, the hormones, and these Frankenstein GMO foods. And you don't have to worry about any of it. So I hope you see for me why we feel in my family it's worth that investment for these little bodies that are growing to make that extra a priority. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit to something that's different, but it's also so totally related. And I feel like everybody needs to know about this. I am going to be teaching you state-of-the-art science today. Lots of people in the medicine world, and pretty much everybody in the nutrition field, are talking about the gut biome. Has anybody heard that term, gut biome? Great, great. Well, for those of you who haven't, here we go. It's exciting, I think. The gut biome is a fancy term that refers to the happy, healthy bugs that live in and on your body. There are 100 trillion microbes right now living and dying on the surface of my skin, on the surface of my tongue, and deep in the coils of my intestine. In my intestine alone, there are 1 to 2 pounds of bugs, and these are pounds that I need to keep around. Scientists have found more than 10,000 species of microbes, and they believe that there are up to 35,000 species of microbes, and they don't even know how to culture some of them. It's a fascinating world. Did you know that 90% of the cells that make up your body are microbial? Only 10% of the cells that make up your body are human. That's fascinating to me. Those bugs might as well be considered a whole nother organ. They're just as vital to your health as your lungs or your heart or your brain. It's a fascinating tiny world that the Lord has created, and I feel like it's a little secret community that we're just now discovering. It's right in and on ourselves that shows just how brilliant and intricate and creative our Creator is. The symbiotic community is suspected to begin in utero, but it really amps up during childbirth. It's affected by whether the baby's born vaginally or through C-section, and then through feeding from the choices of breastfeeding or bottle feeding. It usually stabilizes around the age 3, but it's always affected by antibiotic use, by nutritional elements, and by environmental elements as well. The bacteria is unique to us individually, just like a fingerprint. And it influences our health and our risk for disease greatly. For example, they've shown that babies with a less diverse microbiome have more of a predisposition for asthma, type 1 diabetes, and even obesity. Some of the compounds may play a role in regulating our stress hormone, our stress levels, our clarity of thought, and even our temperament. The expression of thinking with your gut, I think, might have a little bit more to do with reality than we even ever realized. Everything about how you feel, both emotionally and physically, hinges on the state of this microbiome. It is so commingled with our immune system that in the future, scientists feel that we're going to instead call it the microbial interaction system instead of immune system. So what does this microbiome do, this community of microscopic bugs that is so exciting and is so important? The understanding is up and coming, and we're learning more and more about it every day, but there are several things that we know that it does do. When the small intestine in the stomach can't digest some of the food that we eat, those bugs jump in and they offer a helping hand. You've probably heard of the term of probiotics, right? Those probiotics are the bugs themselves. So you eat the yogurt, or you have some fermented foods, or you take the probiotic pill, you're getting more bugs. It's a good thing. Good bugs. Then you've heard of the word prebiotics. And these are the foods that contain the hard to digest carbohydrates that those bugs eat. These would be things like bananas. So any of you who have bananas for breakfast, you can pat yourself on the back for feeding your bugs. Onions and garlic and asparagus and whole grains are also good prebiotics. So those feed the bugs, which is also a good thing. We also know that the bacteria is essential for manufacturing important neurotransmitters, enzymes, vitamins, and nutrients. There is a fascinating gut-brain connection, and scientists are now learning that the gut-brain connection goes both ways. It seems obvious that your brain can talk to your gut, because your brain is believed to talk everywhere, right? Well, they're now finding that the gut actually talks to your brain, too. If you think about the last time that you felt sick to your stomach with nerves, like maybe on your wedding day, or when you took your kid to a new school, or me this morning when I woke up and realized I needed to speak to 800 women about the microbiome and nutrition. Well, this was your gut sending messages to your brain of stress. The gut biome sends those chemical messages through your enteric nervous system, which is 5 million neurons that are embedded in the gut lining, in the lining of your intestine. This nervous system in the gut is so intrinsically related to our brain and into our immune system that they're actually, as of last year, now calling our gut our second brain. It's in large part the microbiome and these gut bugs that are in our gut that are actually doing the messaging and sending the messages through the enteric nervous system. So it greatly influences our immune system, and ultimately the gut biome drives our health. Then in addition to signaling and manipulating the immune system, they also drive gene expression. So the microbiome actually turns on and off genes in your body. You can see why it's important that we love them and that we take care of our bugs and we feed our bugs and we're careful about our antibiotic use, that maybe this even gives you permission to let your kids play in the dirt and not wash their hands before they eat watermelon this summer. Maybe leave this hand sanitizer at home, which I know is so counter to our culture. I, before this, had been a hand sanitizer freak with it in my door, in my car. It's like the first thing I do when I get in the car. We need to stop that and stop killing all the bugs around us, because a lot of them are friendly and we want to keep them around. The last thing that we know that they do is they maintain the integrity of the gut lining. And this is a big part of what they do. This is a very important part, and it relates a lot to one of my favorite topics, which I'll get to in a minute. But when you don't care for the gut lining, that is when you see leaky gut. How many of you have heard about leaky gut? And heard and wondered maybe what in the world is leaking, right? Sounds like a problem. Well, it is, but it's an oddly descriptive name for a poor barrier in the lining of the intestine. So here we have the intestine. It's a lovely thing to see in the morning, right? We have 20 feet of small intestine, and we have 5 feet of large intestine. So that's 25 feet of our body that's actually a border to the outside world on the inside of us, right? If you ever thought about it that way. So besides our skin, the intestine has the most chance of encountering foreign objects and toxins. God has designed our bodies perfectly so that we absorb the nutrients that we need and we move the bad stuff through, the toxins, the undigested food, and we have a perfect lining that it just moves through as waste. This is thanks to the tight junctions that you see on the left side. They keep things where they're supposed to be. Well, when the intestinal lining becomes irritated or inflamed from foods maybe like gluten, or from toxins like the pesticides and the GMOs that I've already talked about today, or maybe some from bad bacterial overgrowth, then those tight junctions loosen and they weaken. And so that's when unwanted food particles and toxins can get through. It gets through into the blood system. When those things are in your blood system, your body senses a foreign object and it feels like it needs to ramp up an attack. It produces antibodies and it sends your body into an overall inflammatory immune response. So this is when we start to see things like digestive issues and skin issues. We see allergies and food intolerances, hormone imbalances, ADD, ADHD, and even depression. If any of this strikes a chord with you or your family, then there's hope. Have no fear, keep calm, and eat gluten-free. Gluten is no stranger to wreaking havoc on the gut lining and causing inflammation in the body altogether. Removing it from your diet as a major food offender, I'd say probably the #1 food offender, is a large part in healing your gut or the gut of your kids. So this topic has become one of my very favorites to talk about, but before I get into it, we all know somebody who eats gluten-free. We hear that a lot more now. Maybe we ourselves eat gluten-free, but what in the world is this stuff? So Jimmy Kimmel went and did a video on his show that I just wanted to share with you today, where he went out and found a couple people and asked that very question.
Do you maintain a gluten-free diet?
I do indeed.
And what is gluten?
Okay, does he know what gluten is? No. Everyone says no.
Well, as far as for me, how it affects my body,
But what is gluten?
this is pretty sad because I don't know.
But hey, I don't know. Next.
Do you maintain a gluten-free diet? What is gluten?
All right, does this shirtless gentleman know it? Yes, okay.
Gluten's in bread. It's a flour derivative, wheat, something like that.
It's a flour.
It's like bread. It's like that pastries.
It's in those things.
Yeah, it's in those things.
But what is it exactly?
Gluten is it's like a grain, right?
I love that video. That poor guy and his side cough. He just is so nervous. He wants to get the answer right. He's on Jimmy Kimmel. So he's wrong. He's totally wrong. It is not a grain, but it is in grains, right? So here we go. We have an anatomy of a grain. Gluten is a protein that's found in the grain. We have the middle layer, the endosperm, and that contains the carbs and the proteins. That is where the gluten is contained. It's a structural protein. It gives wheat its doughy property. It traps air bubbles. If you think about kneading bread, yeast breads, when you're trying to make a bread, the gluten is what traps those bubbles as the yeast grows and holds the structure of the bread. It also gives things this like chewy, soft characteristic. So it's obviously a very small thing, but it can cause a lot of problems in a lot of people. So the biggest group of gluten-containing foods are wheat, rye, and barley. Spelt, farro, bulgur, and a couple of lesser-known grains also have gluten, but we'll talk about these three for right now. Because most flour is made from wheat, this means bread, he was right, bread, pastries, pastas, pizza, anything that's made with regular flours has gluten in it. Rye includes breads and cereals, and barley usually involves malt and beer and the grains themselves. Then there are tricky things with hidden gluten sources like soy sauce and Twizzlers and Mentos, things you wouldn't think, but they have gluten in them. Oats are inherently gluten-free, but a lot of times they're farmed and processed near wheat fields and in the manufacturing plants that also process the wheat. So there's typically a very high cross-contamination opportunity for oats. So gluten-free oats ensure that there's no wheat particles that have gotten into the bunch of oats. It's obviously very important to read food labels when you're eating gluten-free. You want to check for any of these ingredients, and you also want to make sure now the allergy lists typically have wheat on them if it contains wheat. But to be confident and sure that it's gluten-free, the surefire way is to see that it's certified gluten-free, which means that it's been tested and it contains less than 20 parts per million of gluten. So a diagnosis related to gluten can come in a few ways. Oops, sorry. First, we have celiac disease, which is a lifelong autoimmune disease. This is often seen in families who have other autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or type 1 diabetes or thyroid issues. When someone who has celiac disease ingests gluten, their body actually has a toxic physical reaction to it. The body attacks its normal tissue like it's the enemy. It damages the villi of the small intestine. If you remember the picture I had of it, sort of had the little finger-like things. It shaves those off. So then you see a lot of malabsorption and you can't absorb the nutrients. So it's damage that's occurring. A strict gluten-free diet is mandatory for people with celiac disease in order to prevent further damage and to allow their guts to heal. As many as 3 million Americans in the United States have celiac disease. This is 1 in 133 people. I've already talked to a few of you who came by my booth who said that you have it. So we're about right in some of the numbers that Shemin was sharing with those with the who asked for gluten-free meals. But they possibly think it's maybe even 1 in 100 people have celiac disease. Because of the broad spectrum of symptoms that are related to celiac disease, it can be really hard to diagnose, and for some people, from the onset of symptoms to the time they're diagnosed, it can be up to about 11 years for diagnosis. Then we have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. It's a little bit different. Unlike celiac disease, there's no damage that's occurring as far as we know, and therefore no nutritional deficiency as far as we know. On the other hand, gluten ingestion creates a lot of those similar gastrointestinal problems as well as issues with other parts of the body. An estimated 15% of Americans have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And like celiac disease, a strict gluten-free diet is mandatory for those people to heal as well. The last group I'll just mention quickly because it's much more uncommon, but it is there is gluten allergy. This is people who have a histamine response to gluten, similar to a peanut allergy, so they have hives or rash or anaphylaxis even. They obviously need to stay away from gluten too. There are over 300 symptoms that gluten can cause. These are just a few. They range from the obvious gut symptoms like tummy bloating and pain and diarrhea to neurological, like brain fog and migraines. It can be joint pain, fatigue, infertility, and rashes. The fact that the symptoms range so greatly makes it really hard to diagnose. The theory behind all of this goes like this, and hopefully this will pull together a lot of the pieces that I've shared with you already today. So because of the things like the toxins and the pesticides and the GMOs and poor nutrition choices like too many carbohydrates and a lot of sugars, the gut biome is unhealthy. When the gut biome is unhealthy, it can't do its job of protecting the cell wall of the intestine. So we get the leaky gut. Our cultural diet contains about 1/4 of wheat. And that wheat has been hybridized to contain additional gluten. So our body is constantly under attack by a lot of all this gluten that we're eating. And our pore cell wall is so unprotected because we have unhealthy gut bugs. So all that gluten slips through into our bloodstream. The immune system sets up the response, and we create all of these antibodies. And these antibodies go and they attack the weakest link in the chain, in our DNA chain. That weakest link could be neurological, it could be dermatological, it could be digestive, or it could be reproductive. Maybe several of those suffer. I have heard personal stories of people with tremors so bad that they were in wheelchairs on medication for MS, and once they stopped eating gluten, they were out of the wheelchair and perfectly fine. I have a friend who had severe pains all over her body during her pregnancy and after the birth of her second child. When she stopped eating gluten, she was perfectly fine, no pain. My husband's aunt suffers from chronic fatigue, rheumatoid arthritis with frequent infusions for that, and fibromyalgia. She now is able to get up every morning pain-free and take care of her 3 grandkids because she no longer eats gluten. Stories of incredible improvement in children with ADD and ADHD, children with autism, people with migraines, and more. Let me tell you a little bit about my personal story. I can't remember a day in my life before I went gluten-free that I didn't have stomach pains. Every night was the same. I had a gassy, bloaty tummy. It was so painful, and I honestly thought that everybody's stomach hurt every single night. Well, in addition to the chronic belly pain and a constant battle with constipation and IBS, I was always tired. We had a joke in my family that in high school, I held the couch down because I would come home every day after school and lie on it for 3 hours. They were afraid it would float away when I went off to college. Well, about the time I was 30, my husband and I were wanting to start a family, and after 2.5 years, we hadn't conceived. We went to the doctor, we got a whole gamut of tests, both of us, and nothing was found. So we were given the diagnosis of unexplained infertility. My family is unfortunately riddled with autoimmune problems. We have type 1 diabetes, we have rheumatoid arthritis, we have all sorts of thyroid things all over the place just to spice it up. And about that same time that I was struggling with infertility and really wanting to get pregnant, my grandmother, who had type 1 diabetes, was also diagnosed with celiac disease. Well, as a dietitian, I knew a little bit about celiac disease because there was about a paragraph that big in our textbooks in college about it. But I also knew it was an autoimmune disease, and so I knew that it ran in families. And I also knew that it had the potential to affect fertility. So after eliminating gluten, I not only eliminated my stomach pains, but I was pregnant within 3 months. Last August, I gave birth to our 3rd child, who I think is somewhere in this room. You'll see her, she's really cute. Come by my booth. This week was National Infertility Week. And for me, this was the answer to my infertility. I'm not naive enough to promise these results to everybody, by any means. But I know that for some people, the answer to their ailments is as easy as eating gluten-free. So, if hearing all of this strikes a chord in you and makes you think of your child or yourself or someone you know, then here's what you need to do. You need to go to your doctor and you need to ask to be tested for gluten antibodies. Luckily, they're much more aware of this these days because of its prevalence. But unfortunately, they don't know everything yet. We're still learning a lot more, especially we're learning more and more about the non-celiac gluten sensitivity portion. So there's no surefire test that you can take to know that it's going to work every single time. So even if your test comes back negative, I will stand here and tell you, if you feel better when you don't eat gluten and your test comes back negative, don't eat the gluten. Removing gluten from your diet and detoxing your body by taking it 100% out is the only way to know for sure. And it's all or nothing with this thing. Unfortunately, you can't just have it sometimes. They say those antibodies that you remember I had mentioned that happen when you eat it and it gets into your bloodstream, those antibodies, just from exposure once to gluten, can last in your body up to 6 months. So you have to cut it completely out. So all right, thanks for sticking with me. I know I've covered a lot of big health topics this morning, but I feel like everyone in charge of feeding little people needs to know the importance of all of those things and how they all work together. But now I want to give you those 5 take-home tips for feeding your family. This is my middle child. She's cute too, but she's not here. Hopefully they'll give you successes in the successes that you have on your kids' plates, and hopefully what goes into their bellies as well. We all know, and I'm certainly the first to sympathize with you, that sometimes it's easier said than done. But I'm hoping that these tips will just get you off on the right path. So the first tip that I have is don't diet. And that's probably a weird first tip, maybe. But I want to set the stage by impressing on all of us that the importance of healthy, real foods is a lifestyle for the entire family. As women and mothers, we're imposed upon by the body image issues and struggles with our own weight and shapes. But it's hugely important to watch the dieting talk around our kids. We are role models for them, not only the girls, but also the boys. And I think part of the responsibility of raising them is training them to respect their bodies and care for the gift that God has given them. I think we'd all agree that the attitudes that we have about ourselves and our own bodies will be reflected in our kids not only today, but as they grow to be adults too. Maybe it's not even an issue of body image, but it's about what we eat. We're setting an example there too. Kids aren't born healthy eaters, but they learn from us what is healthy. So what are your kids learning about you? We're learning from you, from both your attitude about your own body and what's going in your mouth. So tip number 1, don't diet, means that we set a positive example for our kids about our feelings about food and our feelings about our bodies, as well as making healthy foods a lifestyle and not a diet plan. To be successful in creating a healthy eating, a life of healthy eating, you need tip number 2, which is to fill your kitchen with fresh whole foods. You remember that slide early on with the protein and the vegetables and the fruits and the dairy, the perimeter of the grocery store things, right? This sets you up for success in 2 ways. First of all, you're gonna eat what's available, right? So if the bad stuff isn't in your house to eat yourself or to offer to your kids, then it's simple. You don't have it to feed them. If your kitchen is full of whole, fresh foods instead of the packaged processed stuff, then you're really halfway there already. It's ready to be made into delicious, nutritious family meals. And secondly, you aren't inclined to drive through the fast food places and spend lots of money eating out at at restaurants. And if you're a busy on-the-go family, which I know a lot of us with little kids and all of the schedules that they have then you have it there to prepare and to take with you. If your kitchen is stocked with this and you don't find yourself searching for the quick fix, which if you're anything like me is often the carbohydrates and the sugary stuff. The same applies for snacks. Tip 3 is to feed your kids snacks with staying power. It's easy and convenient to give them simple carbohydrates, high sugar, and processed foods. Believe me, we've all done it. But then what happens? They come back 10 minutes later asking for something else, right? Feeding our kids real food with a little bit of fat and some healthy protein keeps them full longer. Something that sticks to your ribs is what my Southern grandfather used to say. Maybe that's hummus with proteins, or cheese and crackers, or peanut butter and pretzels, or full fat unsweetened yogurt with some honey, which gives you those happy bugs too, as an added bonus. And trust me, I often am inclined to give my kids a bowl full of potato chips too, but it saves the time in the future of not having to dole out more food. And it gives you the chance of saying those 4 beautiful words, which are, the kitchen is closed. Can I get an amen on that one? So I also implore you to be attentive to the snacks and treats that your kids are fed at school. I've had so many friends tell me stories of fistfuls of candy being handed out to kids for just simply standing in line quietly, or a friend whose kindergartner was regularly given Coke and Little Debbie zebra cakes for snack time at school. So just be aware of what they're being fed at school. I hear a lot of talking, so I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. So we need to hold our schools and our teachers accountable and to a higher standard because they play a role too in teaching our kids what is healthy and what they need to be eating. Not to mention just the effects that some of these treats can have on them emotionally and on their bodies. So maybe your struggle with your little person isn't that they eat too much, but that they are picky and they don't eat anything. Don't give up on them. Continue to offer them a wide variety of foods. Involve them in their food selection, and even involve them in the food preparation. Being a part of making the food makes it even more exciting for them to eat. I've also seen success with picky eaters when families serve their dinner family style. That's where there's big trays of food, or maybe not big trays, but different trays of food out on the table, with one tray that you know is a success food for that picky kid. Let them serve their own plates. This gives them independence over their plate. It gives them the opportunity to try something new. And it can help them have the ability to try something new on their own terms instead of having something set in front of them. So give it a try, but don't give up on them. I have a friend and a fellow dietitian named Sally Kuzmchek. She blogs at realmomrd.com, and she has lots of great information there about picky eaters. So if that's one of your struggles at home and you feel stuck, then go to her blog to get some more ideas. My last tip is to aim to eat one meal a day as a family, at least. Jesus broke bread with people because he knew it would create intimacy with them. And it just does. There's just something about eating a meal with people. And as a family, it allows for communication and conversation, and it shows a commitment that your family wants to spend this time together. In the frenzy of our lives these days, it's a commitment to time together, just being together. Not to mention, it allows you time to teach ever-vanishing table manners and etiquette. And it's the playing field for this whole topic that I've had for you today. It's where the healthy, real foods actually hit the plate and the lessons of wise eating begin. So I know I've covered a lot today, and I hope I've done my job of pulling together the pieces not only of what to feed your kids, but why it's important for their developing bodies. I had to share this slide because it sums up how life really works. It kind of goes along with the messages last night of we think we're in control, right? We have great intentions and only the best plan for our family, and our kids still eat their boogers. And they still want ice cream for breakfast, and my 3-year-old still asks for marshmallows and barbecue chips at every meal in our house. And truthfully, many of us were raised on bologna sandwiches and frozen honey buns and Tang anyway, weren't we, right? So my hope and my prayer in covering these topics today is that I've shared with you to inform and educate you. The very last thing that I wanted to stand up here and do today is to bring shame or hopelessness or guilt on any of us, because Lord knows that is the last thing that we need. But the great news about what I've shared with the pesticides and the GMOs and the gluten stuff that all seems a big stuff to digest, no pun intended, is that it's all fixable with proper nutrition. And now you know you can make changes, and even if they're baby steps, every little change makes a difference, and you have to start somewhere. It is not too late. For more resources for gluten-free recipes, I have a personal food blog called Kumquat at kumquatblog.com. And this is where I have over 300 gluten-free recipes posted. And healthyaperture.com is also a great resource for all sorts of healthy recipes, pretty much anything you can think of. It's a gallery. It's kind of like Pinterest for recipes. And great reads for more information about the gluten's effect on the body are Grain Brain by Dr. David Perlmutter, and also Gluten Freedom by Dr. Alessio Fasano, who's done a lot of leading research in gluten. And And then Dr. Perlmutter also wrote a phenomenally compelling, very recently published book called Brain Maker, and that's all about the gut biome. I'm almost all the way through it right now, and it's a fascinating read. And NPR also made a fantastic little 5-minute video that I wanted to share, but it would have just taken too much time. So go to YouTube and look up their NPR gut biome video. And it's really cute, and it's great for kids and also adults too, so check that out. I have this resource page up at my booth too, so if you didn't get all this down in time, then it's over there too for you to see. So my prayer for all of us, truly, is that the God of peace would equip us with everything good. That He would do His work in and through us, caring for ourselves and for our little people. That we would bring Him honor and glory, and that we would be great servants of these gifts He has given us to love, to nurture, and to nourish. Thank you.